there are over 2 billion Christians in the world, and every one of them thinks Jesus, just about every one of them thinks that Jesus got raised from the dead. And what if you can show that it probably didn't happen? I don't think it happened.
There's like a mistranslation with the word for, apparently, the Greek word for homosexual.
There are similarities, and there are parallels to Egyptian religions.
I kind of specialize in Atlantis and the whole Plato myth, and like I do a lot of vids on that. But I also on my channel, like I'm super interested in Bible themes and ancient texts and how they all kind of copy each other and reload and reload and reload. A couple questions here, we're going to whiz through them. So first, because I get this asked a lot, like, what's the historical evidence for Jesus anyway? Like, he was just made up. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that there is actual historical evidence. So what are the main, like, key points that I can throw at people for that Jesus was a man?
Well, okay. So I have a book on this, actually. It's called How Did Jesus Exist? And it's like, he's the best documented person from the first century of Israel, I think, by far. There's nobody else that has a single biography written about him. And so that's one thing. And the Gospels, of course, people discount the Gospels because they say, well, they're Christians, and so they don't really count. But, historians don't deal with it that way. I mean, when you have somebody who's English writing about Churchill, they don't say, well, you can't trust him because he's English. It's like you look and see whether what he says is right. And so you've got, with the Gospels, you not only have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but you got the sources behind these Gospels. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's also a source that people call Q. Matthew has his own source that people call M. Luke has his own source called L. So you got Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, MQL. You've got John's sources, which he's got several sources behind. So you have like you got almost 10 or so things just behind the Gospels. These are independent sources. These are not like dependent on each other. I'm just talking about independent sources.
Okay, they can like fact check what the Gospels.
Well, you can see what Gospels got their information. If you got 10 people talking about this guy, within 30 years, they're independent of each other. But then also, I mean, like another big point is that the Apostle Paul personally knew Jesus' brother, James. He talks about it. And so, if Jesus didn't exist, you would think his brother would know about it.
Okay.
Right.
So that's kind of, so we've got, there's like many sources that even historians are like, that's right.
This is not debated. There's not a university in my country or in your country where there's an expert in Judaism or Roman religion or antiquity, Greek or Christianity who doubts it. But on the internet they do.
Number two, the virgin birth. I remember it was quite a revelation when my dad told me, oh, like that's not an original story to the Bible. Like there are other older references to virgins giving birth. I was like, what? I thought that was literally an original storyline. So do you know what they are? Like what other sources predate, like what could have been inspiration for that?
It's a tricky business because every source, of course, is different. So you don't have like exactly the same thing in any of these sources, but we have accounts of supernatural births that go way back into Greek and Roman mythology, and about historical figures as well. These miraculous births usually involve a god who finds a woman attractive and takes on a human guise in order to seduce her, and successfully, because he's a god. And so we have these reports. The thing is, though, that in none of these reports is the woman a virgin. The whole point of these reports, they have sex, and not only that, but it's usually a married woman. And so. So I was saying that everyone is different, and so every one of these has its own twist. I mean, Alexander the Great was fathered by a god in the shape of a snake, and his adopted father was watching it through a keyhole and was kind of disgusted. But so there's stuff like that. But in the Jewish tradition, in the Christian tradition, she's a virgin, and it's the spin that the Christian, but the idea that a god gets a woman pregnant is common throughout Greek and Roman antiquity.
Oh, okay. So the element of her being a virgin, that is pretty unique to
I don't think there's an example of that elsewhere.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. Well, okay, sticking on this theme, I'm really interested. This is where I get really excited about ancient texts that kind of predate other ones. Are there other themes or stories from the Bible where there are examples of an earlier text that maybe they might have sort of got a bit of an idea for it? Like Noah, obviously, with the Gilgamesh, and Moses with Sargon, the little baby that gets put into a boat. Yeah, are there any other ancient stories that you can sort of see where the Bible may have been inspired?
Well, the creation story is another obvious one, because you have ancient Near Eastern myths that are very Canaanite myths that are much earlier, that have lots of similarities, even in the kinds of words used for the creation story. The one that is most famous is called the Enuma Elish. With the New Testament, there are all sorts of stories floating around about somebody who's born of a union between a god and a human, who is a religious wunderkind, who goes on an itinerant preaching ministry and gathers disciples and can do miracles, can heal the sick and cast out demons, raise the dead, and then at the end ascends to heaven. And so
that's pretty much the plot of the New Testament.
Yeah. So the most famous one is Apollonius of Tyana, who was living at the end of the first century. But like Jesus, I mean, he was a pagan. He was a pagan philosopher who believed in many gods. But he also had disciples and did miracles, and at the end got turned over to the Roman authorities and ascended to heaven. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty close.
Okay, that's sounding like script. You know, like in Hollywood, whenever they make a movie, that normally two scripts arrive at the same time and they're really similar. Like there's two versions of Snow White, or there's two versions of whatever. I think that also happened in the Bible there. Sounds like.
Yeah. Well, that was always the question. And I had my students look at these passages, like the first week of class. I had them read these Greek and Roman myths, and they're saying, "Oh my God, I had no idea." I said, "Yeah. So how do you explain it?" Some of them say, "Well, actually, they stole it from the Bible." I said, "Yeah, but these were written before the Bible."
Problem is there, because you know all about the historical evidence for Jesus. People ask me as well, they're like, well, did you know that Jesus went to India apparently and like became a sort of guru there? Is there any evidence that Jesus of Nazareth traveled anywhere sort of far outside of the Middle East?
Yeah, I've been dealing with this on my blog just this last week, actually, because these ideas about Jesus going to India or going to Egypt or traveling around, they're based on gospels that were forged in the 19th century. And in every case that we have these forgeries, they've been exposed as forgeries and absolutely proved that they were forgeries. And so people just, I think people have, for one thing, people want to sell books. So you write a forgery claiming that this is So like you have people who will go to India and end up in some kind of monastery there, and they'll find this, a Buddhist monastery, and they'll find this book, and then they'll publish it and then make a lot of money. But it's completely bogus. But they're also trying to explain, how could Jesus get all this stuff? I mean, he grew up in like this little place in Nazareth. How did he get so smart? Well, he must have gone off and learned from the Brahmins, of course. Yeah,
it is a bit weird how one guy is he's got a lot of skills that you're not sure where they came from. I can see when I'm looking at like the Egyptian kind of religion, it really has a lot of similarities with kind of liberal Christians, middle Christian. Like, for example, it's all about you and your connection with God or the universe, and the fact that there's a life after death, which is very important, how you live your life and being a good person. It's really similar. And like Osiris literally has a resurrection story. Do you think that Osiris might have been like a kind of test driving some of the early church stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the Osiris thing isn't quite like Jesus' resurrection. And so he certainly, I don't know if you've read the story. It's really kind of a weird story. Isis and Osiris.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
There are similarities, and there are parallels to Egyptian religions. When I wrote my book on the afterlife, I was talking about the background in other religions, and mainly Greek and Roman religions. But I was really interested in backgrounds in Iranian religion and in like in Zoroastrianism and in
Yes.
an Egyptian religion. And after doing all the research, I just came to think, I'm just not sure there's anything there in terms of historical connection. It'd be sexier if there were. It would be more interesting. But so I think what happens is you get religions. I think Christianity was not heavily influenced by Egypt. I think it's heavily influenced by Rome. And there are so many differences with Egyptian religions that I think sometimes you get these similarities just because religious people have a kind of a limited number of options of things they can say. And afterlife is one thing people can talk about, and being a moral person is another thing they can talk about. And so they end up with things that sound kind of similar. And I think a lot of times it's just the way the human mind works.
Yeah, okay, because I'm trying to like research it myself, and I'm finding it hard to find, like, so maybe that's a great answer. Like, there isn't really a connection. Okay, moving on. Well, there's a lot of things flying around as well about Bible mistranslations. I don't know if you know, but like there's one, and I keep hearing arguments for both sides. There's like a mistranslation with the word for, apparently, the Greek word for homosexual.
Yeah.
And the new news is that actually it was more in reference and context to like incestuous child rape rather than like consensual gay.
Yeah,
love.
no, that's not right. That's not right. But it is a mistranslation.
Oh, is it not right?
No, it's not right. So that's so in ancient Greece, like in the days of Plato and Socrates, there was a practice called pederasty, where adult men who were like prominent elite men would take under their wing a young pre-adolescent boy. And would kind of train them in the ways of the city and teach them politics and social and in exchange for sexual favors. So that was called pederasty, and it was an acceptable practice that was not much condemned at all. But that's not what the term homosexual is dealing with in the New Testament, even though some people claim it is, but it's not right. So it's a Greek word called the Greek word is arsenokoites, arsenokoites, and it comes from two Greek words. Paul uses the word arsenokoites, and he may have invented it, but it's made out of two Greek words. One of them is adult male, and so that's why it's not pederasty, and the other is bed, but it's the word coitus, having sexual intercourse, and so it's man sexual intercourse. And the question is, what does that mean? And it does not mean, whatever it means, it does not mean what we think of as homosexuality. The reason it cannot mean homosexuality is because people in the ancient world had no conception of sexual orientation.
Right, okay.
We think, somebody's like inclined one or the other, you're kind of born that way, and or some people still don't think you're born, but whatever. It's like you've got this kind of, and they didn't see it that way at all. What they condemned in the ancient world was, what they sometimes condemned, often condemned, was same-sex relations between adults of the same sex, so men with men and women with women. And it's not because you've got a sexuality that's involved. There's no sexuality involved. It's just like you're bonking the wrong kind of wrong sex. And the reason that it was called unnatural is not the reason that people today do. Today it's all about the plumbing. In the ancient world, the problem with men having sex with men is that the dominant ideology of the world was dominance. The powerful are supposed to dominate the weak. And so there's no problem with a city destroying its neighbor if it's weaker. You just destroy it, and you take all the, you kill the men, you take the women as slaves. Right. There's no moral problem with that because you're supposed to be dominant. Men are supposed to be dominant over women, and men who are men are not supposed to be dominated. And so the problem with homosexuality was never with the dominating part. It was on the partner on the receiving end, because that person's acting like a woman. And
right, so it's all just like tied into this whole idea of bash the woman. Okay.
Bash anything weaker than you. And so this is the powerful are supposed to dominate. And so if adult man's being dominated, he's acting like a boy, as in pederasty, or he's acting like a woman, and it's like he's not acting right. And so that was the problem with it being natural. So it is not an issue of sexuality. It's an issue of many people in the
power
it's power. Yeah. It's power. It's not sexuality.
Okay. So in a few weeks, few days, I'm not sure, 9th of April, where are we?
Okay,
you're doing a big live debate. Do you get nervous at those, or do you enjoy it?
Well, neither. I mean, I do a lot. I do a lot of debates, but anyway, this is going to be this will be the most interesting debate I've ever done.
I mean, this is going to be spicy because you are debating the historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah, and
I mean, that's pretty key to the whole thing.
It is like, yeah, because if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, I mean, there are over 2 billion Christians in the world, and every one of them thinks just about every one of them thinks that Jesus got raised from the dead. And what if you can show that it probably didn't happen? I don't think it happened. I don't.
Very interesting.
Okay. And I especially don't think you can show it happened if it did happen. It's like, you can't go into a court of law and say, yeah, this happened because of a miracle. You can't do that kind of thing. Historians don't do that kind of thing. So I'm going to be kind of going for it. And so my opponent's Mike Licona. He'll be going for it too. So we'll see what happens.
Let's get ready to rumble. Biblical style. And we've come in at 20 minutes. Amazing.
Well, and it actually, it matters. And we're going at it for a long time. Most of these debates, one of the problems is they're so short. You kind of say your thing, he says his thing, and you go back for 40 minutes and you're done. And this is a day-long affair. And so there will be plenty of time to expose weaknesses.
I just recorded a 2-hour debate with my dad because we have very opposite views on the story of Atlantis. I believe that there's a lot of geological and scientific evidence that it's sort of the story was from something. He believes Plato completely made it up and it's all to do with literary invention. So we just debated. I was like, right, come on the channel and we're gonna thrash it out because yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You never convince the person you're debating because they have a vested interest in not being convinced. And the question is, who does get convinced by a debate? It's usually the people who are sitting on the fence. And so that's it's very rare for somebody really to have a hole poked into their major worldview, especially if it's like something that's determining their life, like the resurrection. So yeah. So have you aired this debate about Atlantis?
I'm editing it now, so it's going to be up alongside probably this video. But yeah, it was good. It was good. Dad, he came prepared, but I also came prepared because there's a whole load of evidence that's come out in the last kind of 50 years that's really pointing to huge catastrophes in the Atlantic Ocean around 9,000 years ago. So totally possible.